What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about how many villains is enough villains in Gotham Knight. So I'm going back to the well, okay? There is actually plenty of things you can talk about with villains in Gotham Knights. We've talked a couple times, too, about the specific villains, and I think there's room, honestly, to expand upon those videos, and I can definitely do that if you guys want to see them. We've also talked about how many villains, in general, I think should be in the game, or I think will be in the game, right? I think I ended up somewhere in like the 10 to 12 range. Well, in this one, kind of, close to that one, but more or less, how many is enough? If they do 2, is 2 enough if they do it right? Is 15 enough if they do it right? That's the kind of discussion I want to have in this video. So I obviously want to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and let's just obviously jump in. So it is tough kind of predicting this because you have to, and you could say it's hard to talk about anything with Gotham Knights, right? Because we don't have too much about it. Depending on the structure, and we've talked about that before, right? Depending on the structure of the villains in this game, will, I think, and if and when we find that out, we would learn a whole lot more about kind of the structure of the entire thing. Because if you are told that Mr. Freeze, right, and that's the only thing we can go off of, if Mr. Freeze is like a 3-hour thing, and I say 3 hours meaning if you just do his missions, it's 3 hours. Then we can kind of build it where it's like, okay, well, there's going to be villains. There's going to be kind of side activities to do in this game. There's going to be the exploration. Then there's going to be the main missions, right? And you kind of formulate out how all of that stuff is going to add up in the game, okay? Now, I think you can kind of figure out a little of the things with Mr. Freeze because, yes, there is some jumping around with the mission that we saw in the gameplay, but I would argue it's probably only 20 to 25 minutes max, that mission. And they said they're a little bit more than halfway in. So, again, like reading into it, I would argue or think that Mr. Freeze's arc in the game maybe is 2 hours. So still, 2 hours is quite a bit. If you have 5 villains, and I'm not saying that is enough, right? If you have 5 villains in all, that's around 10 hours. Then you have the main missions. Say that adds 7 or 8. Now you're at 18 or 20. Let's even round up, right? Then you have any additional things that you maybe do. Maybe that's 5 to 10. Maybe you get, so that's kind of what I'm talking about. I feel like I'm kind of close, not to be like cocky or anything, right? But I do feel like I'm kind of close. If we can get that information eventually, which I do think we will, by the way, that I think we'll be able to figure out the whole thing. But again, the question is, well, how much is enough? Well, that's tough because if I told you there's only 5 side villains and then the Court of Owls, and, well, I can even make it nicer or more like enticing to people. What if I said there's 5 villains, 5 side villains, then there's the main story with the Court of Owls, but maybe like there's another villain because of the nature of the story. So maybe in all, if you count the Court of Owls as one singular thing, maybe there's like 7 in the entire game. Is that enough? I would personally say no, but I'm almost thinking, well, there's like quantity over quality or there's quality over quantity, right? Which one do you want? I mean, I want both. Like, that is a cop-out kind of thing to say, but I definitely do want both. Like, if you told me there's only 5 side villains, Mr. Freeze is 1, so we only have 4 more, I would probably say I'm pretty disappointed in that. However, if each of them is 2 to 3 hours long and they're engaging and they're fun and they're all very different from each other, right? All of that stuff. I mean, that right there is around 15 hours of, that's a lot of content, right? If you did that with what I said, right, 10 to 12 villains, okay, now you're at like 30 hours. And again, we don't know how long this game's going to be. Maybe the game is 50 hours long. I don't know. I don't think it will be, but it could very well be. We don't honestly know. So, and that's also assuming, I guess, that each one is even with each other. In fact, if you go back to Arkham Knight, which I always go back to it because of the kind of villain wheel, or like, all the villains that they had in that game. And I've said that, like, I look at that kind of almost as the model, but they're not all built the same. There's some villains in Arkham Knight or some side missions where it's like, you do quite a bit. There's also some where you do next to nothing. I mean, one example I can think of really quickly is actually a person that's been in multiple games is Two-Face. I feel like those went by, I mean, it's literally just like the bank things, right? That's all you do. And well, maybe a little bit more, but that's, honestly, I think it took me maybe an hour or less to do all of the Two-Face stuff. Whereas maybe for Firefly and stuff like that, well, and you could also argue, too, in the scheme of Arkham Knight, when you're actually doing the missions that involve the side villains, it doesn't actually take all that long. I feel like it doesn't take long for any of them if you're just counting it. I just feel like some kind of get spaced out a little bit more than others, right? So it's the same thing here. Maybe Mr. Freeze is one of 4 that's really long, and then there's 4 more, but they're short. It's going to take half the time to do those 4 as the Mr. Freeze 4, right? That's something that I could very well see happening because while I think quality over quantity should be the answer, I think that just generally, right, because you want to keep people engaged, and yes, there may not be many of them, but they could still be really, they could be exciting to play. I feel like with a comic booky kind of thing, right, where you're trying to appeal to as many people as possible, you're trying to make them happy, right, because they tend to get angry easily, and I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing, but if you only had 4 or 5 villains, I think you're going to make people upset. If you had 10, 12, 15 villains, I think you have a better chance of people being like, holy God, they chose this obscure villain that only me and 5 other people know about, and oh my God, Joker, and like you'll have that, you know what I mean? You won't have that if there's less of them, okay? So, and I think the best of both worlds, how do you manage that? Well, I think if you had 10, 12, 15 villains and half of them were long, and then half of them were pretty almost one-off missions. Like you do one thing, characters there, and that's it. But again, it's difficult. Like there's potentially been rumors / teases of Two-Face. There's been, it was that one tease of Poison Ivy, right? And that's up to you to decide as of right now. I mean, obviously we'll find out when the game comes out, but if that's the case, if it's flooded with villains, I feel like they are not going to give them all. And that's actually another element, right? If there is 10 to 15 villains, let's say, which again was kind of my number, a while ago, well, it's going to make people happy that they're all there, but maybe half of them get what they deserve and the other half don't, and people are going to get upset at that. So I don't know. I guess to answer the question in my video, at the end of my video, how many villains would be enough in this game? I would say, not counting story, if we're just counting like villains that are just going to appear in side missions, I'd say like 8. I feel like 8 is a good number. 5 just really does seem too low. 6 is close to 5. 7 is an odd number. 8's even. 8's a nice number to look at. 10's a nice number to look at too, but I would say bare minimum 8. And I would say 8, again, even with the idea of maybe not even all 8 of them would be this extraordinarily long kind of quest arc that's going on with them. You know what I mean? So that's my personal thought. And again, as to who they are, we've talked about that a little bit in the past, and I'm sure we will in the future as well. So let me know what you guys think about this video. If you want me to make videos kind of like this, or kind of spin-offs of this video, also let me know in the comments. Make sure, if you guys haven't already, you guys are subscribed, bell icon turned on so you know all these videos go up. Give the video a like. You guys have been doing great. Seems like these videos have had a resurgence recently. I don't really know why, but I really appreciate it. All of my social media stuff, our Twitter, our second channel, our Patreon, and YouTube memberships, they're all in the description below if you guys want to check them out. That would obviously mean a lot to me. Still continuing on with these Gotham Knights videos. We're getting closer as we start getting, I would say probably into September or maybe even late August, I'll start doing quite a bit on DC fandom and what to expect and going from there. And when we do see the game, the video quantity amount, the amount of videos that's going to go up are definitely going to increase, okay? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all on the next video.